Ladies and gentle thems, my name is Gregory Crafts, and I am one of your Mastermind GMs for hire here today. I am so honored to be here today with fellow GM for hire Arthur, as well as special guests Ming and Lloyd. We are here today to discuss, have a Mastermind Roundtable on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and the new character options presented in there. But more importantly, and I think the more salient point out of all of this is that Wizards of the Coast, creators or owners of Dungeons and Dragons now, the publishers, recently announced that there are no more irredeemably 100% evil races in the game anymore. And how awesome is that? So we're going to talk about that, the announcement. We're going to talk about some of the reactions to it. We're going to talk about the ramifications that it's going to have on game and mechanics, and the amazing storytelling opportunities that this now presents for all of us. So yeah, I'm so excited to be here. You guys probably know me from Monday nights. If you've been watching the Twitch, Monday nights, Brutes in the Shackled City, 7 p.m. Pacific. And I'd like to just go around real quick and let everybody else introduce themselves real fast. Let's start with Arthur.
Yeah, I'm another GM for Mastermind Adventures. My name is Arthur. I use they, them, or he, him pronouns, and I'm excited to be here for this discussion. Ming, you want to go next?
Sure. Ming Zhang, longtime game master of all kinds of games and systems, and professionally, I'm a video game writer right now. And in the past, I made the transition from business over here, so pretty exciting. Thanks for having me. And my pronouns are he, him.
Awesome, welcome, Ming. And of course, last but not least, last in the order, but first in our hearts, Lloyd. Please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Lloyd Lamar. I am. I've known the let's say the creators, the founders of Mastermind for before they were the creators and founders of Mastermind. I'm presently a math teacher. I teach at a vocational school. I am new to Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that's going to have a very big. You'll see as we go on. I think you'll understand why as we start the discussion. I think why I'm new to it. I'm having a blast. With this, my big regret now is I could have been doing this 20 years ago. I could have very easily been doing this like 30 years ago. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited to meet all you guys and see you guys face to face and have this discussion. I think it's an important discussion that we're about to have. Greg and Arthur, I really appreciate you guys kind of pulling this together because I think this is one of those brave conversations we need to have and continue to have as we're looking to kind of make significant and systemic change. So even to see something as beautifully nerdy as Dungeons and Dragons taking a step in that direction, I'm really excited about that. So thank you guys.
Oh man, it's our pleasure to have you. And I totally feel you on the wishing to start, like you wish you'd started playing 20, 30 years ago. They always say that the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The second best time is today. So, right. I think you're coming in at a lovely nexus point of like geek culture and pop culture intertwining, and that the fact that art has reflected life in D&D for a very long time. And now it really is reflecting the life and the times currently. I think with some of these changes, if for those of you who are just joining us or don't know, I also have the chat window up here live on the stream. So we would love to have you guys interact with us. Feel free to say hello, tell us where you're at, and let us know what kind of character you guys like to play in the chat, because we'd love to just kick the ball down, get it rolling here. But like I was saying, for those of you who don't know, Wizards of the Coast recently put out a press release a couple of months ago now that they acknowledge the fact that a lot of character types, races, and characters like groups like the Vistani or orcs even and drow, were all based on cultural stereotypes that were reflective of the times in which they were created. And in an effort to move forward, they have really taken the time to reassess that and to update those points of view within the materials. I know that in Curse of Strahd recently they've really rewritten a lot of the stuff pertaining to the Vistani in order to remove the negative Romani stereotypes that they were based on. But I think it's far more interesting when they take something as a blanket statement, like no more inherently evil races. Nobody is just no one race is just irredeemably evil anymore, the way orcs or drow or goblins were portrayed. And they say that, no, they're just as interesting and diverse and unique, and everybody has their own individual point of view just as much as the normal PCs do and the PC races do. So, yeah, what's your guys' reactions to that just off the top?
For me personally, being new to this, so a lot of that history I'm completely unfamiliar with. So when I started, I didn't know there were these hang-ups or these classifications for different things. So when I developed my first character, it's funny, for people who've been playing for a while, I got some strange looks like, I don't know if that's a thing, you know?
What kind of character did you make?
So I created a half-orc wizard.
Okay.
But here's the tricky part. I guarantee you 9 out of 10 of your funny looks that you got were because the mechanics of the half-orc, right? Forget that it's a half-orc. The robot mold that would become your character had built-in mechanics that didn't favor, the wizard. And
although what wizard doesn't benefit from a +2 to con, But at least they don't have penalties, because back all the way up to, I want to say, at least through 3.5, I can't remember if 4th edition had this or not, but some races had negative penalties to stats as well as bonuses. So you would have they would reinforce the stereotype of the dumb orc by all of them having an intelligence penalty, which, as you know, is the main stat for a wizard. So,
but even so, the idea is that nowadays you have people who don't ever intend to be, prejudiced or racist or anything close to that, perpetuating this race exceptionalism,
right?
Just by virtue of the mechanics, right?
Right.
And
So back to the earlier point, the reason I like all of this is that there's a framework in Dungeons and Dragons. So and the little bit I know about the framework, it's very exhaustive. There's a fluidity to it that I think is very classic. It's beautiful, right? But there is a construct that exists in our real worlds, and you've just already mentioned it. If life now reflects, this game, sometimes we think the things I'm seeing in this game reflect life.
Yeah.
And so when they make a huge change like this, we're now, I don't know, we're in a place where we can grow away from, well, if this man is good with kids, he must be, if this woman likes to build something, she must be, instead of defining people by what we think something is, I think we're moving into this space where we're just going to let people be people.
Yeah, what was that, Arthur?
To Ming's point about getting weird looks for kind of not optimizing your stats, I think that comes from the perspective of going into Dungeons and Dragons as, let me make the most powerful character I possibly can by using the mechanics to build sort of mid-max, as we like to say. Versus, I find it more interesting to make a unique character, and characters are built on contrast and interesting things. I think that even the less racist mentality of, well, your character is not optimized, is a thought that I would even suggest people stay
Well,
away
hold
from.
on. I just want to clarify. I think it's equivalently racist. They just don't intend it to be.
Oh yeah, because it's
Yeah.
racism. It's racism in a way that's kind of reinforced by the mechanics. It's kind of like you're being lured into something that was formed from a racist trope. It's like reading that article of like 10 phrases that you didn't know were racist. Number 7's going to shock you. You know, they're number 7 legitimately shocked me. You know, like there were things that I didn't even realize had really awful roots to them and really awful connotations that have just been commonly accepted by society. And for the longest time, these stereotypes based on, oh, you're an orc, that means you must be exceptionally strong. Oh, you're a high elf, that means that you're haughty and you have you know, you're ethereally beautiful. And oh, you're a half elf, that means that the elves reject you. That means you know, what's that?
Let's get some ugly half elves over here.
Yeah, well, you know, but the half elves are either, you know, like universally ignored by both their human and their elven heritage, or they're the perfect diplomat, even though they go between worlds but never fit into one. You know, it's all these, or the fact that orcs are literally designed for you to be able to kill them without consequence. You know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is deeply rooted and you know, and then you go into the, well, like why were the orcs created? Like who came up with them and what was the stuff behind that? You look into, you know, the origins and the roots of these races. You know, dwarves were, you know, of course, of Norse mythology, but when they were brought into, you know, into the mainstream via Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, he openly admits that he based them on some anti-Semitic tropes. You know, not that he's an anti-Semite, but he based them on.
No,
he
pretty much is, right. It's like, I love Ender's Game, but Orson Scott Card got some
you got to admit that all your favorites are problematic. You know, it's true.
Right. So, and if we were going by mythology, right, like the dwarves in Norse mythology were probably actually just elves.
Yeah. Hey, writers or men, it's not that hard not to be shitty. Or
but you know, and this is the thing when we're dealing with a game system, a storytelling system with its roots in culture that, you know, 50, 60, 70 years ago of pop culture, which was very, very different than today. So not in addition to today, in addition to WotC coming around and doing this today, I think it's welcome. I also think it's long overdue, but unfortunately change, at least in corporate culture change, is slow. You know,
well,
so
the market wasn't really receptive to it until a couple of years ago, and they're reacting to it, right? Which is, for all that I applaud this step, I think it's really the first tiny step that they need to acknowledge, right? They still have tons of ingrained culture in all the races. So we look at Tasha, not only is it optional rules, right? So DMs can just ignore it, but also the fact that every race has these ingrained concepts still within them, even though they changed it with the stats, means that there are still problems with the intersection of optimization and culture, right? And so without getting into that, though, I think there's a point that I want to raise about the storytelling opportunity, right? That goes beyond just, hey, it's more interesting to have a character that's weak, right? Because we're all sick of playing power fantasies. But like, the game is founded on, has a war game origin. So D&D itself is very tactical. And because it has a war game origin, the power fantasy is unavoidable until you get to a comfort level where you're trying to break the default experience, right? And so the storytelling opportunity is really for folks who are not mainstream. And I'll give you a very clear example about this. Let's take your half elf, right? You play a half elf. You're torn between two societies. You have the rigid, haughty elves who value magic and the rugged, flexible humans, and you're not
who are good at everything by default. Yeah.
Or who are up and coming, these upstart young races, and you're torn between these two societies. You have you want to live with the humans, but you want to be accepted with the elves, and you know, you're cast out of one, and the other never sees you as one of them. And like, that is an amazing storytelling potential for, we'll say, a white man to play, right? But if, as an Asian person who immigrated here, who is when I go to China, I'm not seen as Chinese. I'm seen as American, and when I'm here, I'm seen as non-white.
It's literally
That's just my
your
life.
experience.
So there's no actual fantasy for me to play a half elf.
Oh God! So it really is racial cosplay in a way.
Yeah. So
Oh, that's
again,
effed up.
I don't actually think racial cosplay is as bad an issue as people make it out to be, because it does actually develop empathy. It's like the baby bottle, right? But what I will say is that when I play D&D, I do not want to just be me.
Fair.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, let's take the example of like the noble bastard, right? Like or some story where you're an outcast, like you're the fish out of water story, right? You're the one Viking in the desert setting or whatever.
Like 13th
That's
Warrior.
really exciting if you're constantly accepted all the time. But if you are already an outcast, the fantasy is that you are accepted, that you can just go about your job, whatever, healer, mage, fighter, whatever, and be excellent at it, and no one bats an eye that you are excellent at it. So to use your half-orc wizard example, the fantasy is not that this half-orc defied his people, became a wizard against all expectations because either he was special or, through grit or whatever, and earned the acceptance. Like, that's not a fantasy. That's people's lived experiences, right? The fantasy is you're half-orc and nobody blinks an eye at that.
Right. And so it's funny you mentioned that, because when I designed the character, and it's funny, I didn't realize I was doing this as I designed the character. So for myself, being a person of color for 49 years, people have made assumptions of me because of what they saw. But then when they got to know me, they were like, "Oh, wait a minute, we didn't realize," and it was just like, "Well, just get to know me." So for many years of my life, I hid my nerdiness. I camouflaged it as perfectly as I could, and I was the athlete. I was the outspoken person. But people didn't realize that I was an artist. I didn't realize I was an artist. Through photography, through like I've always loved to build things, but if I didn't think that was accepted, I had to hide it. And so my character is just a reflection of me. This is what you see on the outside, but this character is a wizard because of, in a lot of ways, it has to do with even the conflict of my own parents, how they compromised, to kind of navigate me through the world. And so I'm enjoying, what I'm seeing with, Dungeons and Dragons, because as this story goes, I get to win. I get to write it. I get to say the stuff that I wish I could have said over the last 49 years without the consequence of, well, you're black, you can't do that. You're limited here. So for me, I've had people get promotions, be promoted, be elevated, who weren't nearly as talented as me because they weren't black. I've had administrators laugh and say, "Ha, you did all the work, and I'll get all the credit."
Yep.
To my face, and they thought it was funny. I'm like, that's not funny.
Yep. But, I can relate, man.
and there was no consequence for it. So now I'm playing this D&D game, and I'm playing with my daughter is playing with me, and it's hysterical. We made a similar character, and we didn't have conversations. So she came up with a half elf, half orc as well, but her half orc isn't interested in fighting. And so as I'm sitting back watching her character develop, I'm like, I think that
we do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think these changes, for those, and I appreciate you mentioning this, for these changes, if people choose to accept them, if people actually choose to play by them, are going to have an impact, on culture. Because now that I'm embracing my nerdiness, I wear it like a badge of honor.
But the value of these changes is the same reason why we say everybody should share their pronouns, right? It's not because a tool for the people who need it. It's actually cover for the people who need it, right? Because if sharing your pronouns is like, hi, I'm Ming, he, him, if that just becomes normal, then suddenly it's not weird for anybody to do that, right? And so if we extrapolate that lesson to D&D, if suddenly it's just whatever, like it doesn't matter if you're a half orc or a Goliath or a Yuan-Ti, like there's all equivalently okay wizards. That doesn't actually do anything for your character. But what it does is it removes it strips away the intertextual, we'll call it, sorry for a technical term, intertextual bias that carries with it, right? Think of it as the baggage.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a magic dwarf. People aren't like, oh, these greedy dwarves can't be wizards, right? Like it becomes a whole thing because you're giving cover for richer storytelling. So you're actually helping other people rather than the people like that you think.
And you touched on something there, Ming, and I even just want to just acknowledge real quick that the personal pronouns thing, that makes perfect sense to me. And I don't know, I've been working in the arts out here in Los Angeles for years, and I've always been like, always supportive of people sharing their personal pronouns. I've never thought of it as a big deal for me to share my own. But now I'm like, God, that just makes perfect sense, just to make a more comfortable environment for everybody else, just to put it out there, whether it's because I think when everybody looks at me, they see, straight white guy, got it, so that's just the natural, that's just I just assume that's what people assume, and that's not always,
it's also the fact that there could be people who look just like you who do not identify as a straight white guy.
That is true.
Right. So it's cover for others.
If you make it clear, and those other people don't have to fight against that as well.
It's sort of like the idea of the safety pin years ago when back in 2016 when everybody was like, if you wore a safety pin, it was just like a small visual signal that it was like it's cool. I'm an ally. I want to be supported. You guys hadn't heard about this, or was this just something?
No. But I think. But see, the trick is you get everybody to wear the safety pins, and suddenly they're very meaningful, right?
That is true. Yeah.
If it's only like if you flipped it and you said, hey, if you need an ally, wear a safety pin.
No. It was always meant for someone.
No.
Wanted to show.
I understand. Yeah. I'm saying if it was flipped, it wouldn't have a fraction of the impact.
I remember my friends at the time saying why wear a safety pin that can be excused as just wearing a safety pin versus wear a Black Lives Matter pin. No one can look at that and think you anything else. That's how you be a real ally. Because if you're wearing a safety pin, people can look at that and be like, you're just wearing a safety pin versus it makes it very clear which side you're on if you're wearing a Black Lives Matter pin.
That is true.
But I think to that point, I guess there's an interesting question of if as the optional rules currently are, it's basically ignore the rules, put numbers wherever you want, which feels like a kind of a non-answer, which is what do you do about this inherently racist system of giving certain numbers to certain people? It's just ignore it. But what do you do when all the races I guess the question is in my mind is, what is the difference between why choose one race over the other?
Well, first of all, they are nowhere close to differentiating the race to
No, I agree, but in that world where there's not I think stats are one thing, but there's also some races have great weapon fighting just as a racial trait, which is really good to me.
it's super weird.
Stats can almost
What's the trope that you were talking about, Arthur? It was everybody was wearing hats. The Planet of Hats, yeah.
Yeah, the Planet of Hats trope is basically the idea that you go to a planet and everyone wears the same hat, they act the same. And it's the kind of evil racist thing. Like, oh yeah, you see any drow and they'll be shifty. They'll probably try to steal your stuff. Like you go to a dwarven commune and they'll be kind of rigid and prudish, and they're
all
love
Scottish,
metal
and they're all
kind of
alcoholics.
Yeah.
It's like Planet of Hats. It's like, this is a really boring game because the second I meet a dwarf, I know exactly the way you're going to act, just based on dumb old tropes. Versus, like, I don't know if these dwarves are going to be like super nice, or maybe this is a group of just shady evil dwarves, or maybe this is a group of shady evil humans, because most humans end up being evil anyway.
Well, again, it comes back to the point of view that the game takes. Right, so I talked about the game is quite excellent for white men, and I don't want to take that away from white people. Right?
Don't worry, we've got plenty. You could take whatever you need.
No, but my point is, I don't want to take that away because it does a really good job of that perspective, right? Like it does a really good job of perspective, and so what I want to do is expand the perspective. And the reason I'm focusing on perspective is this: the Planet of the Hats trope is a problem. Not because it's using sweeping terms to describe a culture. It's a problem because the point of view it adopts is an external evaluator reducing a culture to nothing but a couple of elements, right? So think about it like this. When you roll a character, you inhabit this role and you go, I am, Hrothor, the Snake Man Ranger or whatever. And in your mind, you probably had a family, you probably had a background, probably some bad stuff happened to you that caused you to be a psychopathic adventurer. But in general, you're pretty fleshed out. And so as you inhabit this role, you go, okay, all this stuff happened. And so now whenever I meet an external thing, which is a culture, I go to Waterdeep, I go to whatever city, I take my character as I understand them, whether it's very deep or very shallow, and I push it against this society, and we have a pure interaction. But that is a first-person perspective. What happens because of the construction of the game is that when you play a human, or in some cases like elf and half-elf because they're human adjacent, you are like that. When you play an orc, when you play dark elves, when you play a gnome, you are actually playing a third person. So think about it like this. You're all playing a video game. And some of you, when you play this video game, it's a first-person shooter. You are in the body of the character. And others, you are playing a third-person RPG where it's Geralt of Rivia or, Cloud, right? Like nobody plays Final Fantasy VII and goes like, I'm Cloud. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but generally people play it and they go, I'm following this other character's story. So now if half the party, if all the further away from the humanist, the default race you get, the further it becomes a third person perspective, that's where the issues come, because now you are playing as you're doing the cultural cosplay for some people, and other people you aren't. And so the key is, if you're playing a half orc or a Yuan-Ti or a flying bird man or whatever, like play it from within that culture, right? And so like the anthropology of that culture involves looking at it from within. So it's not that all the dwarves love metalworking as a problem. It's that if you look at it from an outsider, you go, these dwarves, they're all about metalworking, nothing else to them. Versus from the inside, you go, my society loves metalworking because we come from the deep earth. And it's because we come from this place that we love metalworking, which means that all these other things that we love are a factor of where we came from.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the old improv rule: if this is true, what else is true? And you take that. And it's,
oh God, yeah.
It reminds me of,
well, go on, Arthur. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it just reminds me of I've had a lot of discussions about lawful good paladins, because I think similar to lawful good paladin, to what you were saying, lawful good paladins are like, oh, they're boring because they just want to do good and they'll always do good. And whenever we try to do something interesting, they'll say, no, we can't. That's against the rules or the law.
That's a crappy way to play a paladin.
And yeah, that's my point is I've seen a lot of really interesting lawful good paladins because they are real people who have to wrestle with their own morality and can make mistakes and may have the wrong morality and they are trying to do good, but they are imperfect at it. They are not perfect people. Like Superman is an interesting character if you write him well,
Sure.
because he wants to do good, and seeing him like conflict with himself and other people is very interesting if you do it well. And I think that's to your point, is like not just, oh, I am a good person, I must do good, but like, why does this character want to do good? Where did they get this very strong morality from? And if that is true, what else is true?
Well, and just to touch on that, it's what you're talking about is the difference between playing a like the stereotype versus playing a real character. And it's always, there's the old saying, it's always easy to be a saint in paradise. And sometimes you're dealing with characters where it's like, oh, if your DM isn't challenging you, or if you just have like this straight like rock hard ethos that you will stick to and it's never challenged, then then it's easy to always be making the right decisions and stuff like that. I kind of liken it to Captain Picard versus Captain Sisko, because Picard, he dealt with the big moral stuff, but it always seemed easy. And with Sisko, which is why I think Deep Space Nine is the superior Star Trek franchise of the two, you at me all you want, I'm going to stick to that. Right. I don't care how.
Handle the comments about race. We cannot handle the Star Trek comments.
Yeah, no. I'm dropping hot takes here, y'all. All right, but you're dealing with Sisko dealt with real hard moral challenges, especially in the later seasons with the Dominion War and stuff like that, and that made for a much more dynamic, much more interesting character. And the storytelling opportunities. But to your point too, Ming, talking about how. And I'm gonna liken this to the real world here for a second, and once again going back to art reflecting life, life reflecting art. Talking about how dwarves love, have this stone cunning and have this metal working because of the culture and because of what they've grown up into. It might not, and you hear you talk about the notion of. Make sure it's not cultural cosplay by coming from a place from within it where you understand the reasoning why and everything else. Sometimes I hear that and I go, oh God, that's scary. I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to be inadvertently racist even in a fantasy world here.
It's too late.
Yeah, by opting
for all
in,
of us.
Yeah,
not just you, right?
Yeah.
Like all of us. Too
well,
late.
at least I'm in good company here with you fine gentlemen. So but the. And Lloyd, I'm going to throw this to you because we talked about this a little bit last week. It's not like you have to come up with something that's so different or far away from your own point of reference to feel like that you're doing justice to this. Because Lloyd, I asked you when we were just meeting ourselves last week, what would you say are the hallmarks of Black geek culture? And what did you tell me there? Because it was straight on and it blew my mind and it was so accurate. I almost wanted to slap myself for being so stupid, But I thought it was great.
So and I'm gonna say this. I appreciated the fact that you were brave enough to ask the question, because people aren't asking these difficult questions. So the whole idea of Black geek. Now, mind you, it's funny. I take more offense at geek than I do at Black, because I rather say Black nerd. I believe
okay, nerd versus geek. That's another debate for the ages here. But exactly. I feel you.
Geeks are good at computers. Nerds are good at knowing about Star Trek.
Yeah,
that's my two.
I can do it with both hands, y'all. I'm just saying.
Yeah, so. Wow, he's powerful. So for me, the idea, what is the difference between nerd culture and Black nerd culture? Just the word that you use, there's no real difference at all. And so, and I really believe, like, so for me, I just want to be a man. I don't want to be a Black man. I've never really been interested in that, but because I
really want to be a man, honestly.
but because people focus more of their attention on that appearance. And that's the thing. Like, there's more to me than the outside. And so what's the difference? Just that one word. There is no difference. My level of nerdiness, I'm sure, is comparable to everybody, right here. So, and I think ultimately, like, as we're making these changes, and as we're thinking about the stuff, as I'm learning more about, D&D, I guess the biggest thing that I'm going to encourage people is, don't worry about the rules so much. Just, it's a place to just go have some fun. It's just a place to, you don't have to be so stuffy. You don't have to worry about the consequences of. And for me, and as we're having this conversation, when I leave the house, the first thing on my to-do list, right, is to get back home. Like, I've known people who they left to go to the grocery store, didn't get back home. In D&D right now, I don't have to worry about that. My character's going to go on an epic journey, not to the grocery store or anything like that, but I'm going to go on this epic journey, and I'm going to win, and I'm going to look to win. And worst case scenario, I do something crazy. My character is now gone. I'll make another one. But in this place, I don't have those options. I got to kind of walk through things carefully. And so now to have a game that actually expands who I can think about, or how I can be, or what I can do, and I don't have to be limited by. And again, the limitation, I didn't create the limitation. That's an external. And now we're looking to remove this from this gameplay as well. I mean, I think you're going to have amazing storytelling. I think you're going to have just an expanse of interaction. But then I think you're going to have this opportunity where you're going to have more people that look like myself and Ming, into this game. I didn't know Black people could play D&D. I didn't think it was allowed. So I would kind of, look at it from the window. Wow, man, that looks like fun. And then in my mind, it's like, that's not for me because it's not allowed. And again, that was the external telling me, here's how far you can go. Here are the things you're allowed to do. Oh, you can be good at sports. Mm-hmm. You can be a great dancer. You can sing well. Don't worry about the books and intelligence and art. And, you don't get to be those things, But so yeah, I think, so I like it when I can be in a place where my external is not the first thing I get judged by.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny that as like geek culture or nerd culture, we characterize ourselves as outcasts, and also are very interested in getting new people into our world, and yet we gatekeep so much. Like,
well,
I think that.
Oh, sorry, Arthur.
Well, I would just say that's another great thing about these new rules and this new way of looking at it, is you will get more people and a wider range of people at your table, which means just more games will be happening, more people will be comfortable playing. Like, there aren't suddenly more people who are interested in these games than there used to be. There are just more people who this space is more comfortable for, and they're willing to like take the initiative in like joining the game because we've made these changes.
Yeah, you don't have to have the awkward conversation of like, are you sure you want to pick half orc for your wizard? It's great, but just remember it comes with this disadvantage mechanically, right? Or be like, if you really want to, I'll change the rules for you. Like,
yeah.
like,
so it's funny to say that the first time I ever played, because in my mind I'd already kind of established the how this half orc wizard was going to behave. So I'm in a situation, and here comes this big, like saber-tooth tiger-esque type thing. And the GM says, so what are you going to do? And I go, oh, I'm going to attack. He pauses the game and tells me, well, you're a wizard. Wizards typically don't attack. They're kind of range fighters. So probably in your best interest. And then he backed off and went, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. And I'm like, no, I'm an orc. My dad was an orc. My mom was a wizard. And I'm the blend of the two of these things. And so I I attack this thing and I actually get out of it, still alive, with enough, I didn't lose all my hit points. And to watch the reaction of these other veteran players, they're like, I can't believe that happened. And I'm laughing because I said, guys, this is a game. This is D&D. What do you mean? You put a constraint on this game? Come
you put
on.
a constraint on imagination? Yeah.
I will say, Lord, I appreciate your new player mentality on that. But like people often forget, like even in the first edition, that's how the game was meant to be played. It was written as, if a rule is not working for you, throw it out. The GM gets to decide what's happening, and they can say forget it to any rule. They can decide. Right. I always follow the rule of cool, and I will tell. This is my hot take to everyone out there. If you're a GM, if something happens or that makes you uncomfortable or you don't like it, and your GM says, well, that's the rules, they're not a good GM. No. And you need to find a better one.
Yeah. Yeah, that just winds up on RPG horror stories on Reddit. That's that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Look, I'm just going to say that there's an artistry to the whole process that we can't possibly reduce in one conversation.
Sure.
But the real, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse or any of those systems. It's a different rule set, but they have
for everyone.
Yeah, they have like a Rule Zero adjacent rule in their GM guide that basically says, be a fan of your players.
I like that.
Right? And so think about it like this. It's not about the rules, but it is about the rules, right? If you didn't have any rules, it'd be Calvin Ball. You could just play house. It wouldn't fuel your imagination as well. But if you are limited by the rules, then you're basically playing out a program. Like, go play a video game that does that way better than this.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
And so what a rule like be a fan of your players solves is, what will make your player not happy, but more excited to play?
Right.
And what would you, as a fan of that, want to witness? Right? So if you're like, I attack the tiger. Why? I don't know. Seems fun. That's not very exciting.
Right.
But if you're like, I may be a wizard, but I am the son of a MFing orc, and I'm going to punch this stupid animal right in the face, and then you do it, and it mauls you, but you survive, and you're like, okay, next time I won't do it, right? Or like however you turn the scene, that's so much fun. And you can do it entirely within the rules, or you can just wing the scene. It almost doesn't matter at that point, right? But the intersection of the rules construction and the fandom and the flexibility of interpreting those rules makes the scene dynamic.
Right.
So I think that this actually, I'm hearing a lot of incredible stuff here. Like I'm loving every second of this. But two of the things that I've been picking up on that I want to highlight real fast. Number one, it sounds to me like that the idea of no more evil races is wonderful in many concepts, and it should be expanded on further. But what I'm hearing is that it's encouraging players and DMs alike to make the stories more personal, more individualized, and that may seem like it gets away from epic storytelling, but I and the grand scale of armies marching on Mordor and all this other stuff. But I think it makes it even more fascinating when you know who the heroes are as people and what makes each hero and each key NPC unique and what makes them different, what makes them tick. I mean, Samwise Gamgee is one of the most fun sidekicks out there because he's a freaking gardener, and that he's what he and Frodo are both unlikely heroes, and so what I'm hearing is that this is a great way it's a way to encourage people to tell better stories with more individualized characters, and both as players and as DMs, it's really incumbent upon the DM to go through and flesh out the world more and flesh out the setting more and flesh out these characters more, so they're not just relying on stereotypes and tropes just to fill in the gaps, but you're going to get a better, deeper, more rewarding story and game experience overall if you do that. And I like the fact that, I mean, while it is optional, being in Tasha's and stuff like that, the new optional the character creation options where, change out the racial stats, change out some of the languages, change out some of these things, whether they are trying to address the mechanical advantages that have been created due to the race categories that they have developed. Which they also, boy oh boy, do they blend species and culture into one thing and choose the poorly termed race to define it. Because you have all kinds of issues where somebody gets a +2 con and they're as a physical bonus, but then also, yes, we all fight with axes, and that's just how the culture does it, and that's every dwarf ever always fights with an axe or a hammer, and that's
Well, I think
getting away from that. This encourages people to get away from that, and that's a good thing. The more breakout. And by the way, Lloyd, when you discover Tensor's transformation, you're going to have a blast. I'm just saying. But Arthur, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No worries. I was cutting you off. I think because culture doesn't come from like what race you are. It comes really from your location.
Right.
Like. I said this to Greg earlier, but I feel more kinship to people who live in like San Francisco or like Los Angeles than I do to people who live in like the Midwest, because we are both people who live in large cities on a coast, and we are farther away from each other. Like I live in Jersey City. People who I feel more like people who live in like Los Angeles than people who live in South Jersey. Because that is the culture that we both share, which is the culture of people who live in big cities on a coast. And I think it makes sense that, like, sure, if you live in a mountain, you're going to probably really like gems because that's the only thing you can trade. You're probably all going to be proficient with a pickaxe because you live in a mountain. That's how you make your house. But it also doesn't really make sense that all dwarves ever only live in mountains, because like, sure, a settlement might leave the mountain and go, they're like, well, we got to find another mountain because that's what we are. Like, no, they're going to go find a dwarves by the stream. Like, it's one thing I like about how there's like wood elves and high elves. It's like, yeah, the elves who live in the woods have a certain culture and act like this, but like elves that live in like big cities and are focused more on magic and academics, they're different than that. Yeah. But why is it only between sub-races?
Well, because the elves are the closest human adjacent race in the book, so ergo they get that diversity tag that other races don't necessarily get.
Right, they get to be more diverse than other races, but less diverse than humans.
So really it's token exceptionalism,
Yeah.
It's exceptional tokenism. Yes. So
I've always joked that elves were Asians. Anyways. Let's talk about story theory for a second.
Sure.
Right? Like, we've talked a lot about character. Character is what's interesting, right? And so to use your example of the epic storytelling, like what deservedly got more screen time? The 1,000 troops of Gondor charging into the 1,000 orcs with an incredibly wide shot where you can't make out any detail, and they used CGI to like fill out the sword swings, or watching Aragorn like cut off the head of the mouth of Sauron and then swing his sword forward and charge, right?
Yeah.
It's Aragorn.
That moment when he charges at the end of Return of the King just always gives me chills when he leads the suicide charge. It's just like, yeah.
Right. And like, but not only that, but like, what makes a good character, right? You say, well, it's depth. Yes, depth does help make a good character, and it's doing great things. That does make. But what really makes a character good is that they change over time.
Right.
And a character only changes over time in a story when they're faced with conflict. And the conflict is only meaningful if it ups the stakes, right? Which is easy to do. You fought a small dragon, now you fight a big dragon. But also, that conflict has to be contextualized. In other words, the conflict has to come from an opponent. If it's just fighting increasingly larger dragons, that could be fun, but it's not. It doesn't make your character better.
Right.
Constant in a duel of wits with your rival, that's where the magic happens, right? And it's like, and so how do you get a character, one of your players, to change over time? You have to give them conflict that they care about. If the conflict that they care about is because their character is more incompetent because of the mechanics, or it's them constantly facing prejudice in society, not because of their choices or because it's the kind of story they're in, but just because they exist, that is not meaningful conflict. Right? So again, to use the drow, the classic, the dark elf, you come to the surface, you've got dark skin, everybody thinks you're evil, they ostracize you. That is not a meaningful story unless you're telling the story about a character searching for belonging. If that is the essence of your character, yes, then have them run into the race, the anti-drow racism, and you can have a good story. But as we said before, if the player is someone who deals with that in their own life, they are probably not going to be interested in pursuing that story. And if your player is not interested in pursuing that story, their character will not grow. And if their character doesn't grow, the character isn't interesting, right? So forget about, I mean, it's a pretty big ask, but forget about racism for a second.
All right, let's go back to it.
Yeah. But it's basically about giving your players opportunities to recognize what's going on and then change their minds, right? So this is why alignment is so bad. And people have trouble articulating it. It's because alignment kind of implies this is how you always are. Right? And so to use your lawful good paladin example, what you really need to start with for a character who has a strong moral basis, right? So now we're talking about a moral character. What is the paladin's inherent conflict? If we're just going by archetype here, yes, it's to defeat the big villain, but it's really to confront their own sense of right and wrong. And we players are savvy, we GMs are savvy. We know within a ballpark where their right and wrong should be at the end of their story. And so if we have the player start at the beginning, at that point, where is there to grow? Of course that paladin's going to be boring. There's no way out of it.
And it's easy to be a saint in paradise.
Right. So what you're really asking that paladin player to do is, hey, Bob the Paladin, tell me, what is the lie about the world that your character believes at the start of the adventure? And then at some point you go, like, the lie is comfortable. The lie has worked for them up to this point. Nobody challenges them. But at some point, something punches them in the face and says, you have believed a lie up to this point. What will you do? And if the character X says, I'm going with it, I'm going to live my lie, that is a tragic story. And if they say, I'm going to change no matter how hard it is, that's a growth story. And both are equally valid and equally interesting.
I love that. Hey, Ming, just wanted to let you know, you're getting some snaps in the chat here too. People are loving picking up what you're putting down. So,
Oh yes, tear down alignment systems, please. That reminds me of a story called "The Sword of Good" by Eliezer Yudkowsky. It's a short story, and I unfortunately have to spoil the big twist of the story for everyone. But it is
spoiler hashtag. Yeah.
Spoiler. Please go read the story if you can find it. But it's basically follows the main character. His name is literally Hero. He is like he is transported from our world to a fantasy world, and he is told by a wizard that he is the descendants from the king, and he is the rightful ruler, and the Dark Lord of Bad has cobble together the evil races of orcs, and you have to defeat them. And through the entire time, he kills a bunch of orcs, and he finally gets to the big bad. And the big bad asks him the question, and it's the great decision between good and bad. And the hero is just like, of course I'm going to choose good. That's a dumb question. Choose between good or bad. That's a dumb question. Who would choose bad? And I'm like, I hear him say that. I'm like, yeah, but who's asking the question? It's the big, tall, old white man wizard next to you. He's telling you that's what the question is. And he gets to the Dark Lord, and the Dark Lord is like, I'm just, these are a bunch of orcs who are being slaughtered and enslaved. And you've got these high wizards who are controlling all the magic in the world and using all their privilege just to make them, and there's all this wealth disparity and racism and all this and he's like, yeah, I come from Earth. I know that you can't just murder someone because their blood smells bad. Like, what's happening? And he gives up the power to this Dark Lord, because this Dark Lord is not evil. He just is the one fighting against the person in power. And I think that's a real interesting story you can play, of just like, these are our expectations, and they're...
So what is the lie he believes? The lie he believes is that he is on the side of good.
Yeah.
And when he is confronted with that, he chooses to embrace it or reject it, right? And that is the essence of character development. So here's the second wrinkle, though. When you're running players, you can't demand that players be invested in their characters, right? It's the game is different things for different people, and for some of them, they do just want that third person removal. They do just want a power fantasy.
Yeah, sometimes some people.
So
just
how
want
do
to
you
roll
get
dice.
them to feel? How do you get them to feel? Whenever you want to deliver an emotional impact, you have to hurt the player, not the character. In other words, don't kill their brother. They don't care about their brother. It's not their actual brother. Hurt their ability to continue in the fantasy, but do it in a clever way that they did it to themselves. And so why am I bringing up this theory in the context of Tasha's? It's because, again, by eliminating dumb conflict from the mechanics, you're removing friction and giving yourself more tools to play these tricks on your players.
Absolutely.
And that's really all it comes down to.
Lloyd, as a new player, what do you think about hearing all this?
I'm excited, because I mean, if I'm having this much fun at going from level 1 to level 2, I can't wait till I really learn how to optimize, and not optimize in the sense of I'm the biggest, baddest orc wizard in the world, but just optimizing how to play the character. Because from a nerd math brain, when I play this game, it's all about solving problems. It's not even about the situation. And so for me, and it's funny, I find myself doing this because I do this in real life. I will assess the abilities of whoever's in front of me, and then kind of come up with a game plan of how we're going to attack this. So a buddy of mine, we have a friend who has this huge yard, and there's no way that she was going to be able to kind of deal with these leaves. So a bunch of us decided, I bet we can get it done in an hour if 5 or 6 of us do this. So we show up, and then and I'm looking at it, I'm like, these guys are not optimizing what they need to do. And it's, hey fellas, I got an idea. They're like, okay, what's the idea? And I'm like, all right, you here, you got the blower, you got the rake, let's go. And we crank this thing out in an hour. I catch myself doing that in the game.
Yeah.
I assess the situation, and they're like, what are you going to do? All right, here's what I think we should do. Which is so funny, because it's what the character would do. Mm-hmm. So when I'm hearing all this stuff, and again, I know there's so much of me in this character. I get it, but so I'm excited. And then at some point, when I figure out what my schedule is, I can't wait to jump into some other campaigns. I've peeked at what you and Arthur are working on, and I'm like, oh wait, that looks like way too much fun. That's
Well, Lloyd, we've got plenty of games here at Mastermind Adventures.
We
Oh, I
do.
know.
We absolutely do.
I know. And so, but now I'm thinking, especially with what, Kristen is creating, I've got friends of mine that have been playing D&D for years, but I didn't know they were playing D&D for years. It's because they kind of kept it a secret type thing. So I'm looking forward to, where this goes. But I'm enjoying just the opportunity just to kind of be in a situation, be given a problem, and find the best solution. So, and the teacher part of me, I'm like, wow, I bet I could make this into something I could pull into a math class.
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and not even close, right? Like, like it's way better.
Right.
The orc has 36 hit points. What average roll do you need on 4d8 in order to take it down in 2 rounds? Or just
and even things like that, and then and I'm so used to playing video games where you have the little life bar and you can tell how close it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we're fighting something, the GM is not giving us any idea how close or how far we are from doing this. And like in a video game, I would change my weapon according to, wait, I'm trying to finish this thing off. So now, because we don't know, we're trying different things and we're like giving suggestions. No, do this. No, do that. Da, 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 da. All right, what are you going to do? And I'm watching the other players and I'm thinking, now mind you, my character wants to be the hero. So even in my mind, as I'm playing the game, I'm like, all right, what can I do to be the one who delivers the final blow? Whatever so yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Plus, my character has what they call war magic, and so I'm trying to figure out how best to, as the character evolves. So like a classic nerd, when our game is over, I go back and I study. I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do? And so
Lloyd, ping me after this. I'll show you all like the crazy wizard optimizations.
okay.
Make your GM cry in 5 easy steps. Like that.
You could build a whole YouTube channel just on concept videos. I think people have built whole YouTube channels on concept videos like that.
My favorite way to do that is so you play a rogue and then you get to like 11th level. That's all you have to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because rogues with evasion and so much sneak attack dice, it's just like can't see him, can't kill him.
Oh man, rogues are bottom tier. But let's not get into this.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy. Well, I think this has been fascinating, and I know that I've loved every second of this conversation. Lloyd, you're getting some snaps in the chat here too, man. So everybody seems to be digging this. So I think let's go on ahead, and it's just after 5 now. Let's go on ahead and start talking about takeaways here, like final thoughts and stuff like that. Ming, what do you what would you say is a kind of like a takeaway from the conversation today?
So first, I have to apologize to Lloyd because I hate what I've done here is I'm like that guy on the magic show who's like, this is how they do the trick, like, and I hope I haven't robbed you of any of the like the what is it, the mystique of
No, you definitely haven't. You definitely haven't done that. No, I'm still in it to win it. So no, I'm good.
I love it. I love it.
And then my big takeaway, like something for me that's been it was very meaningful with this whole thing is I just love talking craft with other GMs. Like if you turn this into a 5-hour conversation, I'd be here. It's 8:12. I haven't eaten since 11 or something like that, and I don't care because this is so much fun, right? So for me, I love talking to other people. I love the craft of storytelling. I love talking about all these little tips and tricks and like how we do all this stuff, like like for example, D&D, regardless of its fantasy genre, it's really a post-apocalyptic game. And so every time you can bring in a post-apocalyptic trope and hide it under fantasy, you'll do really well, right? And you're like, well, what do you mean? Well, it's because you are a bunch of like self-sufficient stragglers traveling from isolated community to community, raiding like the leftover pieces of an older society, right? Like
all of our secrets.
It's literally post-apocalyptic. So every time you can put in the vibes of like The Walking Dead and stuff into your D&D, it's gonna feel real good.
Oh my God, I'm totally doing that now.
And your players will never know. They will never know because they'll still be thinking like dragons and magic, and they don't realize that what they're basically like rooting for canned food in like a zombie infested house.
So I need to rewatch Walking Dead season 1 and just make that, like the start of my next campaign. I dig it.
Yeah. Just imagine Walking Dead season 1, but the main characters are anime characters.
Or you just
You've got a D&D campaign.
There are other tabletop role playing games besides D&D.
That is true. Arthur, what
I should just say, Greg, you should definitely play an Apocalypse World system, or the Powered by the Apocalypse system. I think you'd get a kick out of it.
I would love to play that. If anybody
I'm a big fan.
If anybody wants to set up a stream of that, I'm totally down to play. I would love to give that a shot. So, yeah.
Greg, I told you, talk to Dan.
I will. Yeah, Dan ran our fantastic Pompeii game, which we've got highlights of on our Twitch channel here. And I love the fact that Dan showed up in full Roman armor to run the game. Like, he just had that.
Yeah.
Like that's my kind of nerd right there. I dig it.
If you're not comes in full Roman regalia, you're not doing it right. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, no, I showed up in a t-shirt and jeans for my Goth barbarian, the Visigoth barbarian. So yeah, good times. Dress for the role you want, right? Arthur, what would you say is a takeaway for you from this whole conversation today?
I think the takeaway is you can always re-examine both stories and how you tell them. And if you are falling back on old tropes, whether they be like steeped in racism or just tired and bland, they should always be rethought and re-examined and like diversify your storytelling in every sense of the word. It makes it more fun.
Absolutely. And Lloyd, do you what especially as a new player perspective, I definitely value your insights on this. What would you say are your takeaways from today's conversation?
Well, I guess so. My takeaways, I probably got to do a lot more studying because some of the vocab you guys are throwing around, I'm like, I'm supposed to be the one who confuses people with like technical terms, but so I've got a little bit to go, but I guess one of the bigger takeaways here, especially when talking about the changes that are being made, and in the game and in the games and stuff like that, is that I'm encouraged that we're moving in the right direction, and even though I didn't start like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Part of me is like, okay, maybe I didn't because I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it then because I would have picked up on the racial nuances, and I already lived through racial nuances.
Yeah.
And so now to have the opportunity for that to be stripped away, and I really think I'm going to enjoy as I move through and learn different things, but to not absolutely be in a place, even though it's fictitious, where I do not have to deal with the things that have held me down. None of that has to be there, And so for the 2 hours or 3 hours that we play, that I'm presently playing this game a week, just to like. And then even, and I don't know, guys, this is going to sound a little weird, but I still think it's a good takeaway. I find I'm learning about myself. And I know how corny that just sounded, so I apologize.
No, it's true. It's true. You learn a lot about yourself when you're put in these situations, because these characters, as much as we try to make them different personalities and separate them from ourselves, they are still rooted in us because we are the ones inhabiting them. If you handed your character sheet to somebody else, even with all the same stats, even with all the same backstory, even with all the same tropes and things like that, they would fill in all of those gaps that you don't see, all those intangibles on the sheet that aren't that you don't see on the sheet. They would fill that in with themselves, and they would play that character completely differently. You know, even if it's the same mechanics, even if it's the same backstory, even if it's the same social stats and everything else, everybody pours themselves into their character. So the idea that you're learning more about yourself is a wonderful thing to realize, and it really is one of the benefits of playing these games, because you get to find yourself in situations and reacting to situations that you don't encounter in reality, and not just like, oh, I'm fighting a dragon. It's moral challenges, thought challenges, all these other whatever your DM throws at you. And I think that while wargaming and throwing dice around is a lot of fun, that was chainmail. That was the original game system, was the wargaming is chainmail. Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game. You are playing a role, you are playing a character, you are telling a story. And every good story has challenges. Every good story has growth and development of character. And as we participate in that as authors of this story, it's going to change us. So that's not weird. That is a feature.
No,
not
it'd be
a bug.
weird if that wasn't a takeaway.
Precisely.
Yeah, the amount of times my players have told me that this session felt therapeutic. I've lost count. Like that, it's likened to therapy a lot in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And some therapists are using D&D and other games now to help and assist in that too. It helps people separate a little bit and see things from a arm's length perspective. So
even at Mastermind we have Quest, which is a game designed for kids to help them like deal with real world challenges, and we use it as a therapy tool.
Yeah, you would. I think the term is low stakes practice, right? Right. If you go, I'm nervous to speak in public. Okay, go sing in front of 10,000 people. That you're never going to get there. But what if you go, my elf character delivers a tale in front of 10,000 people, right? Like suddenly you're practicing on the fly, and hey, look at that.
A good DM will go, great. What do you say? And it's okay because it's just like you and the buddies at the table, and it's a safer environment. I'm sorry, I totally hijacked your takeaway there, Lloyd. I didn't, and I hope it didn't come. I hope you realize I'm trying to validate what you're saying, not counter it.
Big snaps. So anyway, so you pretty much just finished my thought. So the idea is that I'm finding myself learning about myself, and here's the rest of the coininess. I'm actually liking it. I think a lot of times as people, we spend a lot of time explaining what's wrong with us or what needs to change. And then, in this play, I just get to be. And so I don't have to be anybody except for this character for a little bit of time. And it helps. I look forward to it. It's can't wait for Tuesday. Like, guys, this has made Tuesday exciting, because before Tuesday it was just Tuesday.
Like Tuesdays for tacos, and that's about it. So
the second worst day of the week.
So, Greg, what is your takeaway?
Well, first off, I really just appreciate the fact that this conversation has opened up some thoughts. I like to think of myself as a pretty open-minded, woke dude, and but this conversation has opened up a whole bunch of different things that I hadn't thought of before, and perspectives that I hadn't thought of before, especially the idea of how some of these exotic character tropes and exotic character plot ideas, like being caught between two worlds, are some people's real life experience, and when they come to the table, they want to play what I kind of experience as my default, and of just being like universally accepted, and I kind of hit the genetic lotto, and I'm a mediocre white dude, and just like a lot of what Ming, Lloyd, you guys brought up some fantastic points that have really given me a lot to chew on, and I sincerely appreciate that. And also, It makes me really excited to just think about all of the more exciting and deeper and richer stories that we have the potential to tell now, when every character has the ability to be treated as an individual, whether they're a PC or an NPC, and no one character is the ambassador for their whole race, and they're expected to adhere to mechanically expected to adhere to stereotypes. I think it'll take a more effort on the side of PCs and DMs alike in order to do this. But just hearing what we talked about now, the ideas that we're spouting out. Oh, thank you, Kristen. I appreciate that. Thank you. Just spouting out the ideas that we've talked about here. It's not that much more effort. It's not some insurmountable mountain to climb here. It's just putting in a little bit more effort. It's just putting in a little bit more thought process into the story that you want to tell. It's the DM being willing to challenge the players. It's the DM willing to put in the thought and effort to come up with the challenges. It's up to the players to create the characters with that nuance and depth of strongly held convictions and beliefs, and being able to write that into a background that the DM can then turn around and go, okay, I'm going to screw with you this way, this way, this way, and this way, and ultimately your arc is either going to be growth or tragedy, and it's being willing to invest that much of your time and energy and thought and self into that process. And that sounds like a big deal, but even just based on the conversations that we've had here, it's not that much effort to do that. So it's just being willing to go that, not even an extra mile, it's being willing to go an extra couple of feet just to put that thought process into things. And you're going to have a much more interesting and rewarding experience for it. And I'm glad to see that while progress is slow, that I think that this is a welcome change and one that has been necessary for a long time, and it should be embraced, because I think our games are about to get a hell of a lot more interesting and exciting. So
sure, I mean, and just to piggyback on what you talked about, change. Right now, I think change, when it's moving in the right direction, has an exponential potential. And I think we haven't hit the curve just yet, but when we do, it's gone. And we're moving in the right direction. And so right now, I'll take leaning forward instead of falling back, any day of the week. So
and I will point out that it's probably actually less work overall. It isn't even just 2 steps forward. It will save you work in the long run.
Right.
Because this thing that feels like work that you're doing, all you're doing is hacking away at worthless intertext, worthless baggage that has been carried along, sure. And you have to somehow magically work into every game, right? You're basically going up front, I'm just going to pull this weed out so I don't cut its leaves for 10 minutes every day for the rest of this campaign, mm-hmm. It saves you work in the long run. And so I don't even think of it as like extra work.
Yeah, and honestly, the more the PCs can invest in their characters, or the more the players can invest in their characters, and the more story that they give, it's just makes it so much easier to come up with challenges and to make things personal, So, yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I start like on my session 0 every campaign. I say like, my world, there's not a lot of like racism, homophobia, transphobia, or sexism in this world, unless like you like specifically want to tell a story dealing with one of those things. We can have a conversation, and that's not just between me and the player, but me and all of the players, because like we have to make sure everyone's comfortable with someone else playing that and their character dealing with that. But I think it's just much easier for yourself, for your players, to just like have that. Like, I just don't have that because it's not a story that I'm interested in just having as a part of my world.
Plus, why would we assume that every fantasy world has racism?
True.
Yeah.
Why would you want that?
If you can have a
world than that. Come on, we're smart DMs.
Awesome.
We're intelligent people. We can do better.
Well, thank you guys once again, Ming, Lloyd. Thank you so much for joining Arthur and I today to have this conversation. I hope it is the first of many, and I hope the folks who checked out today's conversation will have their own conversations amongst their own tables, and just be willing to embrace change and evolution of views and. Just as a quick wrap up here. Once again, this has been the Mastermind Roundtable today with our guests Lloyd and Ming and fellow GM for Hire Arthur and I are just so honored to have been able to have this conversation. You can book Arthur and I to run games for you, one-shots, short-term limited campaigns, full ongoing weekly campaigns. You can check us out at mastermindadventures.com, and we would love to run a game for you guys anytime soon. So please feel free to hit us up. And Lloyd, Ming, do you guys have anything you want to plug real quick?
Fire away, Lloyd.
No, I'm good.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think we're going to be back. Oh, damn it. I totally just minimized the window. Hold on. What did I do? I just wrecked the stream. Oh, God, I broke it. Here we are. Now it's back. Arthur, I think that you're back next with the next Mastermind Roundtable are we doing one in 2 weeks, or are we doing it in January since it's the holidays?
I believe we're having one on romance, and I will not be on it, but I will be heavy in the chat because I'm very interested in it.
Oh, yes.
I believe 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, 2 weeks from now. Kristen, do we remember who's running the one in 2 weeks? Kristen's in the chat right now, so she's... and then, Arthur, you're hosting the one in January, though, and that's on... help me out here. I'm blanking.
The date?
No. What is it that you're talking about?
Queerness and tabletop role-playing games.
That's right. Yeah. So so Arthur will be back in January talking queerness and role-playing games, and we're gonna have Allie, Christy, and Mariah in 2 weeks talking romance. I'm going to be heavy in the chat on that one as well, as I am now in a situation in Brutes in the Shackled City where I have a PC-NPC flirtation happening that the player also happens to be one of my best friends, so I think she's enjoying screwing with me. But it's getting interesting, and I could use some tips on how to handle this and make it fun. So, yes, thank you guys all once again for joining us this week, and we'll see you guys at the next one. All right? Take care. Everybody roll them 20s.
Roll them 20s. See you guys.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Later.
And we're out.
And we are